Diaz Palmer here to talk you into the Diamondback broadcast for the third time in as many days. Arizona's going to be playing the first-place Cincinnati Reds. Diamondbacks suffered a tough loss yesterday, getting shut out by a pretty good pitcher in Cueto, and had the exciting rookie Bauer going on the hill, but wasn't enough to get it done as the D-backs were shut out and suffered their fourth loss in 5 games now since the All-Star break. We're going to talk about that coming up. Also, a really fun story involving the Arizona State Sun Devils and University of Arizona. You can't have enough of those, even if it isn't in season, so to speak. And yet again, more Suns news. Also, readdress what had happened with our conversation yesterday. Remember, I was very hard on the city of Glendale because of this sales tax that it is insisting on instituting to try to keep the Coyotes, and I was using such terms, and I don't know if I use this one in particular, but it's elitist is what it is. I was saying that if you put somebody in office, that they at least need to wink at their job as a representative for you, the voting public. That is the nature of representative representation. They are there essentially trying to pursue your better needs or wants, which is a little bit of confusing water to tread, because often when somebody starts pandering to voters, we're critical of them. We suggest that we are sending these people into office because of their beliefs, and personally, that's where I stand. If I was ever going to campaign for something, I would be telling you what I think, not necessarily what you want to hear. But once I get into office, if I am, say, presented with a petition, even if it was potentially sent in a little bit late, or if it didn't necessarily have the absolute correct number of signatures on the appeal, I would probably go ahead and stick it on the ballot just because I'm there to represent you. I apparently am not one alone in thinking this, because nobody else really seems to be going along those lines. And I think we got a little bit of information here that was released yesterday that kind of explains why that may be. In the news, presidential candidate Mitt Romney is being again criticized because he is only agreeing to release his 2010 tax return. And one commentator said that refusing to do so is either evasive or stupid, is either a signature of evasiveness or stupidity. I don't know why this is an issue. And now let me be perfectly clear, as I think I've said before. I am an unregistered voter because I believe in the bumper sticker that says don't vote for either party, and I'm paraphrasing. It only encourages them. I find most of what these elected officials do reprehensible, and the last thing I'm going to do is allow them to believe that I think that anything that they're up to is A-OK. So this is not part of an appeal to try and win favor away from Obama toward Romney or vice versa or anything like that. Just letting you know what's out there. So this is evasive or stupid, and it might be either or. I don't know why this is an issue, because apparently there is some reports that if Romney is elected president, he would be the richest president that the country has ever had. And nobody is really sure exactly how much money Mitt Romney has, but the rumor is it's about $250 million. That's an awful lot. That's a lot more money than most people could ever begin to understand how to even spend. It's a real Brewster's Millions situation. But what had wound up coming into the news, as reported by Politico and picked up by the Arizona Republic, somebody had approached Senator McCain, our own Senator McCain, about whether or not this inability or the lack of transparency on Romney's part while releasing or failing to release as many of these tax returns as possible was one of the reasons that he opted not to put him on his ticket, even though he was a relatively strong second-place finisher in the 2008 Republican primaries. I'm going to read to you. McCain responded, "Of course not," when Politico asked about the comments asked if the contents of Romney's tax returns disqualified him from the selection process for his VP. Quote, "I don't know what depths these people won't reach. Obviously, it's just outrageous. That's just outrageous. It shows it's so disgraceful for them to allege something that they have absolutely no knowledge of." Or in other words, according to John McCain, Romney's wealth and lack of transparency was not going to cost him a chance to be his VP. He went on. Asked why he chose not to go with Romney, McCain said, "Oh, come on. Because we thought that Sarah Palin was the better candidate." Ooh. Why did we not take Tim Pawlenty? Why did we not take any of the other 10 people? Why didn't I? Because we had a better candidate. The same way with all the others. Come on, why? That's a stupid question. It's a pretty damaging answer, though, to come from somebody who has come out and endorsed Governor Romney, to say that in 2008, the reason why this now presidential hopeful Romney was not made the potential vice president was because we had a better candidate. That's a ringing endorsement. Now think about this. There's a lot of people out there who've been saying, hey, why would the Republicans churn out this field? President Obama is supposedly weak. He is supposedly on the ropes. And the Republicans come up with a field that involves, at this point, nobody who's really been able to inspire the base, and a bunch of former losers like Ron Paul, like Mitt Romney, like, among others, and then some congressmen, a very bland governor in Tim Pawlenty, a very kooky governor in Rick Perry. It was a strange field. And now after Romney, in his second effort, and remember, Romney's a two-time loser. He lost his senatorial bid in 1992, lost his presidential bid, or just the bid to get the nomination, in 2008. The last thing he needs is somebody pointing out that why he did not continue on in the public mind in 2008 was because, quote, we had a better candidate. It really adds to this conversation about why now is Mitt Romney the best choice to try to beat the guy who beat him in 2008. What has changed since then? Well, according to Arizona Senator John McCain, very little, because this was in response to a question about, is Romney too rich to be your vice president? Likewise, is Romney too rich to be our president? I think the reason why this keeps coming up in the news is because there is a question about whether or not the American people are going to respond to somebody who has so much money, who has untold wealth. Well, are they? I don't know. I think it's a stupid question. I think they're trying to play to everybody's different levels of insecurity and prejudices. Yes, prejudice. If you're not going to vote for somebody because he's fantastically rich, how is that different than not voting for somebody because of his race or religion or something like that? It's reverse prejudice is what it is. It's like in the military when somebody's asked, are you an officer? No, I work for a living. Well, what are you saying? Just because somebody's more educated than you or makes more money than you, that means they don't necessarily work as hard as you? All right, it's prejudice is all it is. But it's also contributing to this notion that these elected officials need to at least appear as if they are not elite. And this article in Politico goes on to say, or quote one of McCain's advisors. I'll read again. Senator McCain got caught flat-footed answering a question about how many houses he owned. In fact, they were Cindy McCain's properties, but that distinction was lost in the political optics, and we knew it would be a big liability that the presidential and the vice presidential candidates together owned more than a dozen homes, because people get a little bit uptight when they're struggling to get by and hear their presidents and their vice presidents and their governors and all that stuff have a lot of wealth. It makes no sense. It makes absolutely no sense. I paused so you can drink in exactly how little sense that makes. If somebody is the best candidate because they agree with you, or you can understand the way that they're explaining issues or something like that, it should not matter how many houses that they own. And why these different candidates all try to pretend as if they are anything besides elite is only because they are trying to appeal to you, the voting base, as part of their effort to become popular. Because they understand that people get a little bit jealous when some don't have as many houses as others. I only have the one. It's not fair that they have the 6, 7, 8, 9, 12. All right? But furthermore, my question is, why do we have this conversation? Because it should be well understood, using everything that's happening in Glendale right now as an illustration, that these guys are elite. They're elite because they believe that when they get into office, it don't matter what they do. All that they're going to continue doing is everything that they think is best that should be done, right? We think that we should be able to vote on whether or not we're going to be taxed, says Glendale. The elected elites in Glendale said, no, you will be taxed and we will keep the coyotes, all right? Why we have all these different elements of we're not that elite, we're just kind of like you, hey, look at me, I'm drinking beer, and Boilermakers says Hillary Clinton, or Obama's trying to rub elbows in 2008 and accidentally asked for some brie. Oh my gosh, he's an elitist because he likes different kinds of cheese and everybody else just drinks or eats American or what have you, is all just ignoring or trying to misdirect all of the attention away from how these guys, they are elite. They believe that they are, because when they get into office, they don't care what you think. And everything that's happening in Glendale right now is illustrating that. And I'm going to further argue that we are being conditioned to accept this by our brave media. You want evidence? Newsbusters.org had this outraged commentary on George Lopez's new show. George Lopez is that comedian who always talks about Latinos because he's Latino, and I've never really understood it, but then again, I'm not. And he was on TBS doing a late-night variety show, I guess we'd call it. You know, it's like Conan O'Brien, except not funny. The best thing that ever happened to TBS was that they were fortunately able to cut George Lopez loose when Conan was made available. And apparently, now that his show's on HBO, we find out why he wasn't very funny on TBS, because George Lopez needs the F word. Yeah, I've got a transcript of what he had said about both Romney and then our own Sheriff Joe Arpaio. And it's got a crutch, definitely got a crutch. And then it begins with an F, that crutch, the F word. But what he had said about Romney, among other things, was talking about how apparently Romney's ancestry helped settle a Mormon colony in Mexico. And Lopez suggests that Latinos aren't going to vote for Romney because they don't know that he is Chicano, but he won't admit it, right? I don't know. It might be funny if you're into that sort of thing. But throughout the tirade, he uses a derogatory, if not vulgar term in Spanish that is, again, I'm reading, a rough description for a male prostitute. In Mexico, it's used for cowards and traitors. Or in other words, George Lopez called Mitt Romney a coward or a traitor. If nothing else, a prostitute. Okay? Now, if this were, say, real life and not politics, if you're going to call somebody a name like that, you better have a good reason. Or you better get ready to get punched in the face, right? Sticks and stones may break my bones and all that stuff, but sometimes you're actually on the mark with those words that never hurt you. Because, you know, I'm pointing out the truth here. I just got done shopping for a car yesterday. Scumbags lied to get me out there, all the way out in North Phoenix. All right? I stopped just short of calling him a liar because I didn't want to get punched in the face. The thing is, if I called these guys liars, I would not have been wrong. So then the question then becomes, am I being unreasonable by suggesting that these guys are lying to me? And if I'm not, well, then, you know, it shouldn't really matter what I'm calling them. But this columnist says, nice thing to call the presumptive Republican presidential candidate. But I digress. Or in other words, because this guy is running for president, because he is the presumptive nominee, all of a sudden he's beyond reproach. Nobody can call him a name, right? How is this not going to continue fostering that identity of elitism for all of these elected officials while they try to pretend like they're not elite? If these guys are so perfectly washed that we can't say something like they might be cowardly, then how is this not contributing to this concept that they are elite, right? Why does this make them feel the need to pretend like they don't have all these houses, or that they didn't marry into or earn all this wealth in the cases of McCain and Romney respectively? Especially when they get into office. Now, the overwhelming evidence is that they behave as elitists in the sense that they don't care what you have to say, the people that they represent. And just go one step further with Romney here is a question I'd like to ask Noel Shepard of newsbusters.org. Okay, we shouldn't call this guy the presumptive Republican presidential candidate a coward. What, this guy who wants to expand the military by 100,000 people, yet has never served. His children have never served. In fact, it's rumored that when he was asked whether or not it's a little bit hypocritical about whether or how he wants to expand the military and send so many other people's children off into war, and his children, and he did not serve, he said, well, no, his children are serving by trying to get him the presidency. Megalomania is what we call that. All right. But again, somebody who is so willing to put somebody else out into the world to fight and has never done so, you might be able to craft an argument that that is cowardly, whether or not he's running for president. And by subjecting ourselves to all this media that continues to foster this understanding that these guys are elite while they pretend like they're not elite, that is Hippocratic right there. It's hypocritical, beg your pardon. And it's something that we are changing right here as we get ready for the Diamondbacks game. Again, I'm D.S. Paul. We're going to come back and get into the world of sports as the Diamondbacks are trying to win the second of Well, the third game of 4 against the Cincinnati Reds. Coming up on iTalk 106.7.